Good morning, everyone. In this lesson, we are going to continue with writing equations, or actually talking about equations. In this lesson specifically, we are going to talk about write equations in slope intercept form. So in the previous half of this unit, we talked about how to graph equations, right? We were talking about how to graph equations in slope-intercept form, graph equations in standard form, graph equations using a table. Now we're going to reverse it a little bit, and we're going to talk about how to write equations in slope-intercept form. Okay, so here's this first example. Here's how you write it. Step 1 is to find the slope. You can use two different ways to use this. You can use the rise over run. If you're given a graph, I would use this method. Or, if you're given 2 points, you do y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So after you find the slope, you find the y-intercept. Okay, so this is when x is equal to 0. So I'll go over this in a couple examples that we're going to do later on. But just be aware, y-intercept is when x equals 0. So after you find those 2 points, you just plug it into slope-intercept form. Remember, slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b, where m is equal to your slope, and b is your y-intercept. So right here, all you're changing is your m and your b. That's all you're plugging into this equation. Okay, so let's do this first one together. Remember, step 1 is to find your slope. It looks like my slope is, they did run over, looks like rise over run. So it's the same thing. You go up 1, 2, 3, left 1, 2. So it's negative 3 over 2. My b, okay, remember, I said when my x is equal to 0. In this problem, my x is equal to 0 here. So x equals 0. When x is equal to 0, y is equal to 5. Therefore, b is going to equal 5. Anytime you're given a graph, you will always be given a y-intercept. Okay? So, therefore, b is equal to 5. So in this one, same thing. You look for when x is equal to 0, then b is equal to negative 3. So in this equation, you just plug everything. Remember, this is your m, this is your b. So instead of y equals mx plus b, you have y equals negative 3 over 2x plus 5. So that's the equation. Okay. Moving on to letter B, number 1, find my slope. M is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 over 1, 2, 3. So it looks like 5 over 3. Step 2 is find your b. Remember, as you said, that's when x is equal to 0. So it looks like in this problem, b is equal to negative 3. So my equation is going to be y equals 5 over 3x plus negative 3. Or you could just write y equals 5 over 3x minus 3. Okay? All right, well, now why don't you try these 3 problems on your own? Why don't you go ahead and work on these problems and solve them? I would have to say number 3 is interesting. Right, number 3 is a little different because you're not, well, finding your slope isn't a big issue. But your y-intercept, you're like, well, I'm not given a graph. How do I find my y-intercept? I'll give you this one. Remember, my y-intercept is when x equals 0. X equals 0. So therefore, this is my y-intercept. So this is my b. Okay, so your question may be, am I always going to be given a 0? Or am I going to be given a graph with the y-intercept? Yes, for now. Later in this lesson, not in this lesson, later in this unit, we're going to talk about what happens, how do I figure out when I'm not given one. But for now, you will be given a y-intercept. So why don't you try these 3 problems, submit them onto that puzzle. All right, next example, we have two more examples left. Moving on, write an equation line shown in the graph. Remember, always do your slope first. Well, this is a horizontal line, right? The slope of a horizontal line is 0. Because hoi. My y-intercept looks like it's -4. So y equals 0x plus -4. Or it's just y equals -4. And you could always double check your work. Isn't this the equation for y equals -4? Yeah. So that's how you know you done it correctly as well. That's another good way to check it. Right? Example number 3, real life application. This graph shows the distance remaining to complete the table. Write an equation that represents the distance y in feet remaining after X amount of months. Once again, it's the same process. Y equals mx plus b. So step 1 is you have to find your slope, right? You have to find your slope, and it looks like my slope is going to be remember, this is -2,000, right? Because I'm going down by 5, so number 1, 2, 3, 4 would be m equals -2,000 over 4, which is -500, so that's my slope. My y-intercept looks like it's just 3,500. So let's write the equation. There we go. Okay. And now, how much time does it take to complete the tunnel? Well, so this is where you have to use the graph. Well, if I want to complete the tunnel, how much distance is left to complete the tunnel? How much distance is left to dig? Well, if I'm completing the tunnel, does that mean distance is equal to 0? Yeah, right? So if I want to, there's two different ways you could do this. If I want to see what distance is equal to 0, one way is to use the equation. Y equals -500x plus 3,500. Distance is y in feet. So I'm going to plug in 0 equals -500x plus 3,500. You solve for x. Right, and then you divide by -500, you divide by -500, you get x is equal to 7 months. That's one way you can do this. Another way is by taking a look at your graph. When distance is equal to 0, x is equal to 7. So this is another way. You could have just looked at the graph and be like, oh, when I have 0 distance remaining, 7 months to complete. That's it. That's all you have to do for that one too. Okay, so there are two different ways you can do it. You get the same exact answer both ways, but that's just either way. Okay. Why don't you do number 4 on your own and then circle your level of understanding. You do have big ideas math for homework today, and I will explain a little bit about that too. So your homework is BIM, but I do want to preface you real quick. Take a look here for number 12. I'm trying to help you out here. This is a little tricky. You have to convert from inches to feet. And you must leave it as fraction in simplest form. Okay, so why don't you complete the big ideas math, and then afterwards, if you still have questions, you could either reach out to me or we'll go over them tomorrow in class. All right, have a good Monday. See you all later. Bye, everyone.